I was 8 years old when my stepmother came to live with us. Her name was Adisa, and she was beautiful, with skin like polished ebony and eyes that seemed to see through you. At first, I liked her. She brought me sweets and braided my hair in intricate patterns. My father, a quiet man, seemed happier with her around, so I tried to be happy too. But things changed. It started small. She would hum strange songs at night, songs I had never heard before. The melodies were eerie, and sometimes, when I woke up in the middle of the night, I would find her sitting in the middle of the yard, staring at the moon. She never blinked, not even once. One evening, when my father was away visiting another village, she called me to her room. The air was heavy, and the kerosene lamp flickered like it was afraid. She handed me a small calabash filled with a dark, thick liquid. "Take this to the river," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Pour it at the foot of the baobab tree and say, 'What was taken must return.' Then come straight home." I didn't want to go. The river was far, and the baobab tree scared me. Everyone in the village said it was where spirits rested, but I couldn't say no to her. There was something in her eyes that made my chest tighten, so I took the calabash and left. The night was too quiet. Even the crickets seemed to hold their breath. The moon was full, casting long shadows on the narrow path. I walked as fast as I could, clutching the calabash like it was my only protection. When I reached the tree, the air turned cold. My hands shook as I poured the liquid at the roots. It smelled like blood and something sour. I whispered the words she told me to say. "What was taken must return." The wind picked up suddenly, swirling leaves around me. I froze as a low growl came from behind the tree. My legs felt like they were made of stone, but I forced myself to look. A figure stepped out from the shadows. It was a man, or at least it looked like one. His skin was ashen, and his eyes glowed like embers. He stared at me, then at the calabash, and smiled a smile too wide for his face. "She sent you," he said, his voice like gravel. "She thinks she can undo what she did." I didn't understand what he meant, but I didn't wait to find out. I dropped the calabash and ran. The path seemed longer than before, and the shadows felt alive, reaching for me. When I finally burst into our compound, Adisa was waiting by the door. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I thought I saw fear in them. But then she smiled, that same too wide smile as the man by the tree. "Did you do as I said?" she asked. I nodded, too scared to speak. She touched my cheek, her fingers cold as death. "Good girl," she said. "Now go to bed." That night, I didn't sleep. I could hear whispers coming from her room, voices that didn't belong to her. My father came back the next day, and for a while, things seemed normal again, but I knew they weren't. A week later, Adisa disappeared. My father said she left to visit her family, but she never returned. The villagers whispered that she had gone to the river and never came back. Some said the spirits had taken her. Others said she had taken something that didn't belong to her and the spirits demanded payment. I never told anyone about that night, but sometimes, when the moon is full, I think I see her sitting by the baobab tree, staring at the sky, humming her strange songs, and I wonder if she's waiting for me. After Adisa disappeared, life at home became quieter, but it wasn't the kind of quiet that felt peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that pressed on your chest and made it hard to breathe. My father grew distant, his laughter fading like smoke. He didn't talk about Adisa, and I didn't dare bring her up, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. About that night, about the man by the baobab tree. A few months later, strange things began happening around the village. First, animals went missing. Chickens, goats, even a neighbor's dog. At first, people blamed wild animals, but no one ever found tracks or signs of a struggle. Then, one of the village boys went to the river to fetch water and came back pale and shaking. He said he saw a woman standing in the river, her back to him. She was humming a song soft, eerie, and familiar. When he called out to her, she turned, and he swore her face wasn't human. The elders dismissed it, saying the boy's imagination. But I knew, deep down. One night, the whispers came back. I woke up to the sound of voices outside my window. Low, hushed tones, like the wind trying to speak. My room was dark, but the moonlight spilled through the cracks in the wooden shutters, painting the floor in silver streaks. I got up, my heart pounding, and the shutters. At first, I saw nothing. Just the yard, the shadow of the mango tree, and the faint outline of the Adisa. She was standing under the mango tree, her head tilted, as if she were listening to something only she could hear. Her dress, the same one she wore the last time I saw her, hung loose on her frame, torn and dirty. Her skin looked pale, almost gray, and her eyes, they were empty, like deep, dark pits. She turned slowly, and I ducked behind the shutters, pressing my back against the wall. My heart was racing so fast it felt like it would burst. I clapped my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. "Come outside, child." Her voice floated through the window, soft and sweet, like it had been before everything changed. "I need your help again." I didn't move. I couldn't. "Don't you want to help your stepmother?" she said, her tone sharper now, colder. "I helped you, didn't I? Took care of you, fed you, braided your hair." The shutters rattled, as if something had grabbed them. I squeezed my eyes shut and prayed to every spirit I could think of. I prayed until my lips were dry, until my voice was no more than a whisper. And then, just like that, the whisper stopped. The air in the room felt lighter, and the crickets outside began to chirp again. Slowly, I opened my eyes. She was gone. The next morning, I told my father everything. About the night with the calabash, the man at the tree, and what I saw under the mango tree. His face turned pale, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. He called the elders, and they came with their charms and prayers. They sprinkled the compound with ash and salt and tied red cloth around the mango tree. The chief elder, a man named Baba Oladel, pulled me aside after the rituals. "Child," he said, his voice low and serious, "what your stepmother did was not natural. She made a pact with something she should not have. The spirits are restless because of her. You must never go near the river again. Do you understand?" I nodded, but his words stayed with me, haunting my thoughts. Years have passed since then, but the memories never left me. Adisa was never seen again, not truly, but the villagers still tell stories of a woman who hums by the river on quiet nights. Some say she's waiting for the man by the baobab tree to forgive her. Others say she's looking for someone to take her place. And sometimes, when the moon is full, I hear her voice in my dreams, soft and sweet, calling me back to the river. The elders' rituals seemed to calm things for a while. The whispers stopped, and the nights became quieter. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. The mango tree in our yard still gave me chills, even with the red cloth tied around it. And the river, though I never dared go near it, felt like it was watching me. Months passed, and life began to feel normal again, or at least, that's what I told myself. But deep down, I knew something had shifted, not just in our compound but in me. I started dreaming about the river almost every night, the same dream. I was standing at the foot of the baobab tree, and Adisa was there, sitting on its roots. Her back was turned to me, her head tilted as if listening to the wind. "Come closer," she would say in that soft, sing-song voice. But no matter how much I tried to move, my feet wouldn't budge. One night, the dream was different. This time, I wasn't standing by the tree. I was at the riverbank, staring at my reflection in the dark, rippling water, but the face looking back wasn't mine. It was hers, Adisa's, her eyes locked onto mine, and her lips parted into that too wide smile. "You can't escape," she whispered, though her reflection never moved. "You owe me." I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. My father rushed into the room, his face pale with worry. When I told him about the dream, he sat silently for a long time, his hands gripping his knees. Finally, he spoke. "There's something I didn't tell you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Before Adisa came to us, she had another family in her village. A husband and a child. They disappeared. No one knows what happened, but when she came here, people whispered that she had done something to them. I didn't believe it then, but now." He trailed off, his eyes glistening with tears. I felt a chill run down my spine. I wanted to ask more, but the look on his face stopped me. That night, I made a decision. I had to face the river. I couldn't live with the fear anymore. I didn't tell my father. I didn't tell anyone. Just before dawn, when the world was still and the village was asleep, I slipped out of the house and made my way to the river. The path felt longer in the dark. The trees seemed taller, their branches twisting like hands reaching for me. By the time I reached the baobab tree, the sky was beginning to lighten, and the air felt colder than it should have. The river was still, like a sheet of black glass. I stepped closer, my heart pounding so loud I thought it might wake the entire village. I stared at the water, waiting for anything to happen, and then I saw her. Odysseus' reflection appeared in the river, her face calm but her eyes piercing. She didn't look angry or sad, she just looked hungry. "You shouldn't have come," she said, her voice echoing like it was coming from inside my head. "I want you to leave me alone," I said, my voice trembling. "I didn't do anything to you." She tilted her head, studying me like I was some strange creature she didn't understand. "You finished what I started," she said. "You woke him. Now he follows you." I didn't know what she meant, but before I could ask, the wind picked up, and the surface of the water rippled violently. I turned to run, but something cold and wet wrapped around my ankle, pulling me back. I screamed and kicked, but it was no use. "Stay with me," Odysseus' voice whispered, softer now, almost pleading. "I'm so lonely." Just as I felt myself being dragged toward the water, a sharp, piercing cry filled the air. It was a rooster, its crow cutting through the dawn like a blade. The grip on my ankle loosened, and I fell to the ground, gasping for air. When I looked back at the river, Odysseus was gone. I stumbled back to the village, my legs trembling with every step. When I reached home, my father was waiting for me, his face pale and drawn. He didn't ask where I'd been, he just hugged me, tighter than he ever had before. We left the village a week later. My father said it was time for a fresh start, far away from the river, the tree, and the whispers. But even now, in a new town with new faces, I can still feel her watching me. And sometimes, in the stillness of the night, I hear her humming.